One chair was missing at my mother-in-law's Paris gala, mine. I didn't raise my voice, I raised the stakes. In 30 minutes the dinner, the yacht, and the week unraveled along with their secrets. If this kind of fallout hits home, you're in the right place. This is Family Fallout Stories 365. Tap like and subscribe so you never miss the next twist. Paris smelled like wet stone and cut roses the night Victoria turned 70. The Musée Rodin garden glowed with rented starlight, strands of bulbs trembling over white linen and a table set for 12. I arrived last on purpose to give everyone time to be their best selves without me. There was no place card with my name, no chair. A server glanced at me guilty, Grant looked away, Victoria's smile floated like a swan. "We must have miscounted," she said, a silk knife wrapped in charm. Heat rose to my face, but the old muscles of composure tightened first. 5 years with this family had built me a spine made from event timelines and swallowed comebacks. I smoothed the skirt of my black dress, stepped close enough to smell Victoria's perfume, and said softly, "If I'm not counted, I'm not covering the count." I turned before her answer could land, before Grant's reasonable voice could ask me to be gracious. Past bronze sculptures and whispering donors, I crossed the gravel path, the tiny stones cracking like ice beneath my heels. On the street, Paris roared with scooters and laughter, ordinary life ignoring curated pain. At the cafe across from the museum, I ordered an espresso and pulled out my phone. Atlas and Ivy opened with a brief pulse of blue. Every vendor, every guarantee, every deposit sat in neat, obedient rows I had built myself. I started a timer 30 minutes and tapped the first reversal. Across the street, the garden lamps threw halos on the magnolias. A waiter passed a silver tray through a drift of champagne flutes. My heart beat like a metronome I could finally conduct. The app pulsed again, confirmation one, then another. I watched the dots spin, not with vengeance, but with precision. It felt like breathing after holding it too long. Order came to me in a flower shop that never slept. My mother kept trans florals open from dawn to near midnight, wiring stems while I did algebra on the counter. "People pay for pretty," she said, "but what they need is timing." Timing paid for college. I stacked classes, ran deliveries, and when a biotech summit's caterer bailed, built a spreadsheet that rerouted canapes like ambulances. Someone asked for my boss. At the moment, I said, "You're looking at her." Atlas and Ivy began as a color-coded Google sheet, and a name I typed at 3 a.m. Something that carries weight, something that climbs. The first client was an HR director who hated chaos more than procurement. I delivered a run of show so clean you could eat off it. The CEO said, "Make it invisible." Invoices arrived in 6 file types, vendors called at midnight. I learned enough code to see the problem and hired a junior dev for the elegant parts. We stitched payments to dashboards. The first time Atlas and Ivy pushed a refund before a VP could panic, power clicked into place like a seatbelt. We grew to a dozen. I signed a cheap lease, put my mother's shop on retainer, and in a nor'easter moved a gala to a generator-lit museum. Word spread. My inbox turned into emergencies. That's when Grant walked in at the Whitaker and Hale Spring benefit. Rooms bent for him, but he found me behind place cards with a radio on my dress. "You're the person keeping this from combustion," he said. "I'm the person keeping salmon away from vegans," I said. He laughed like it was the first honest thing he'd heard all night. Victoria arrived as an accent on his last name, emerald silk, air kiss, the room making space. "Grant," she murmured, "introduce me to the miracle worker." Her eyes swept my flats, my frizz, my clipboard. "Marvelous instinct for the practical," she said. "We must polish it." Coffee arrived the next morning with a note. "Timing is everything." He listened when I talked features and bragged about me to men who never learned the names of women with clipboards. We argued, my calendar versus his, my mother versus his parents, but kept finding a middle. When he said he wasn't like them, I believed him because I wanted to. Victoria's guidance multiplied. A tailor, a salon, a board appropriate to your entrepreneurial background. "Marble stains," she said in their Beacon Hill townhouse. "Society does too." I smiled, armor disguised as gratitude. The gala that made us real nearly broke me. A healthcare client wanted a warehouse turned into a story about access. The sprinkler permit imploded at noon. My dev pushed an update from a laptop on a milk crate. Exceptions rerouted. The day exhaled. Doors opened with 3 minutes to spare. A board member asked, "Who are you?" "No one," I said. "That's the point." Grant proposed on a ferry at sunset. My mother wept. Victoria dabbed at nothing with something monogrammed. "Wedding planning should have been my arena, but tradition matters," Victoria said, and the guest list filled with strangers. The band learned songs that didn't sound like us, and the officiant had baptized Whitakers since Hoover. I held ground where it mattered. my mother walking me down the aisle. A bilingual toast. On the day, Victoria stood with a leather folder like a concierge of destiny. The ceremony photographed as joy, even with a knot in my stomach. We said our vows, mine careful, his practice smooth. As applause rose, my cousin Thai whispered, "Did you change yours?" I hadn't. Later I saw the edit, a line about counting each other first shaved away. The sound glitched. The videographer blamed compression. Grant smiled the way men smile when a room is already on their side. Victoria hugged me, smelling like orchids in victory. I called it a glitch. I told myself timing fails sometimes. I told myself a lot of things you tell yourself when you've already rented the future. The envelope was thick enough to have posture. Whitaker crest, midnight ink, Victoria's stationery that smelled faintly of violets and money. Inside, an embossed card. Your presence is expected for Victoria Whitaker's 70th Paris. Black tie, Musée Rodin Garden dinner to follow, reply to Claire. Family schedule enclosed. Not please, not would you. Expected. Grant read it over my shoulder. Mom's excited, he said, like we'd just been invited to a backyard barbecue. She wrote family schedule, I asked. She means the donors, he said. France likes a plan. France and I had that in common. I opened Atlas and Ivy, built a project called V70, Paris and fed it everything. Flights for 8 Whitakers and 5 satellites, a block at Le Bristol, after-hours Rodin, private boats on the Seine, a day in Champagne, a bakery tour for Melissa's kids that would never happen, a hair and makeup team that signed NDAs before touching a brush. The system knit confirmations to payments until the dashboard looked like a heart monitor in perfect sinus rhythm. Victoria called the next day. Claire is overwhelmed, she said, stage sighing. Could you take things in hand? It's simply easier when you direct the vendors, you have a knack. Happy to liaise, I said. And Maya, she added, velvet smoothing steel. When we say family, we often mean the inner circle, you understand. I've noticed, I said. She pretended not to hear. Vendors answered my emails quickly, Renee at the museum, the Seine captain, the sommelier in Rhymes. We'd worked together before, they owed me favors and I owed them clarity. I sent over the Rodin run of show with contingency trees, rain plan with heated marquee, B-set floral recipe if peonies wilted, generator redundancy if a fuse blew. It was muscle memory. Order was how I loved the world even when it didn't love me back. 2 days in, a ripple. The museum's finance office wrote, we attempted to pre-authorize the Whitaker and Hale corporate guarantee. Your card on file is more responsive. The tone was polite, the underlining unmistakable. I called our finance manager. Float the Rodin deposit on our line. We'll reconcile when their wire lands. Maya, that's a chunk, she said. We're mid-quarter, cash is clean, but it's a flagship vendor, I said. Relationships keep us alive. Copy, I'll tag the risk. The Seine captain pinged next, alt guarantee. The W&H card hiccuped. He added a shrug emoji like a man easing into bad news. I pushed the yacht deposit through Atlas and Ivy's corporate account. A second risk tag lit up. At dinner, Grant scrolled his phone while I recited logistics. Mom hates Rhymes at dawn, he said. Move champagne to midday, add a breakfast for donors. You want 4 kitchens to rejigger menus in August? I asked. He smiled. You always do the impossible. That's what people say right before they blame the girl who did it. He reached for my hand. You know I don't. Nobody lies better than someone who thinks they love you. The family schedule arrived in my inbox, an Excel antique with hard-coded chaos and notes from Claire that read like a cry for help. I rebuilt it in our system, sent a clean link, and watched as people ignored it in favor of a group text labeled family that I could only see on Grant's phone. Family lunch at El Ami Louis. Family hair at David Mallet. Family fittings. Family prayers. The word stretched and snapped until it didn't include me at all. Renee called from Paris with the kind of voice people use right before they pull a tablecloth. Madam Whitaker sent over a revised seating plan, he said. 12 seats, not 13. That's early, I said lightly. We haven't even fought about centerpieces yet. Shall I hold until you confirm? He asked. Please, I said, the air pressing around my ribs. I messaged Grant, heads up, Rodin says 12 seats. That a mistake. He replied with a thumbs up I didn't know how to translate. Atlas and Ivy chirped through the week with the cheerfulness of software that believes in people. The Le Bristol suite map locked. The bakery tour somehow remained. The hair team doubled because Victoria believed Paris humidity conspired against her. 2 vendors sent soft-coded warnings. Wire pending. Please advise EOD guarantee update requested. I shifted from Whitaker and Hale to us again, watching the float rise like tide. At my mother's shop, we built mock centerpieces, peonies, garden roses, thin candles to match Victoria's taste for slim silhouettes. She want everything thin, my mother said, trimming leaves with a snap. Thin candle, thin patience. She wants the story to fit, I said. I'm not the shape she ordered. My mother set down the shears. Then you write the story. On Friday, Claire called, all whisper scream. She's adding a donor's breakfast and the museum wants a second guarantee, and Edward's assistant says the bank will confirm tomorrow, and could you? I've got it, I said, already typing. Thank you, she breathed. Also, Victoria notes, 12 for dinner. I stared at the number on my screen. 12 looks so innocent when it's just a pair of digits. It doesn't mention who's out. That night, our finance manager texted, we're at 62% utilization on the corporate line for V70. I know you know, just eyes open. Eyes open, I wrote back, and then sat alone at the kitchen island in the townhouse Victoria had insisted we borrow while our place was painted. Grant was with Dad, smoothing something or learning how to look like he had. I opened the family thread on his iPad because that's the kind of woman I had become, one who verified. So proud of this week, Victoria wrote, we keep it elegant. Melissa added a gif of clinking glasses. Then a note, casual as lint, count as final, 12. My phone chimed at the same moment with a different sound, the tone I'd assigned to our bank. A banner slid down, partner credit watch. Whitaker and Hale facility adjusted. Exposure guidance updated. I tapped it and read the line twice, then a third time, the numbers rearranging what I thought I knew. We left for the airport at 6, the townhouse still smelling like last night's coffee and lemon oil. Grant hummed something from the 80s while he zipped his garment bag. I checked passports twice, chargers 3 times, and opened Atlas and Ivy to review the day. Car at 6:15, Logan at 6:45, wheels up at 8:05. Timing was a hymn I knew by heart. His phone lit on the kitchen island while he stepped into the shower. A preview banner slid across the glass like a skater's blade. Celeste, can't wait to see you in Paris. Have you told her yet? A photo bubble below it, blurry, peach-colored, unmistakable as a sonogram. My palm went cold against the countertop. Water beat behind the bathroom door, steady as a metronome. I didn't think, I moved. The screen opened with his face. My hands were more precise than my mind, tap, scroll, screenshot. Messages stacked like floorboards. 4 months of plans, hotels, hushes, the vocabulary of second chances between people who never had to earn first ones. You promised after Paris. She'll be fine. I don't want a scandal for Mom's birthday. We'll do this right, announce in September. She's strong, she'll land on her feet. A girl, Celeste wrote, heart tiny as a period. She already kicked when you called. I emailed the images to a fresh address I'd created for emergencies, a thing I'd set up one insomniac night and never used. Then I deleted the trail from his phone, cleaned the cache, closed the app, and stared at the empty home screen as if it could testify. The shower cut off. I put the phone back exactly where it had been and looked at my reflection in the black window. Same mouth, different woman. Grant walked out in a towel, steam fogging the doorway. Car here? He asked, casual, the kind of casual you can only pull off when your life fits you like a tailored shirt. In 3, I said. My voice was normal. My hands weren't. By the time we were through security, I could breathe again. He bought 2 croissants and tore mine in half like we'd done the morning after our wedding, crumbs on a hotel sheet, my mother calling, Victoria already editing. Paris is good for us, he said. We need a reset. From what? I asked. Life, he said, smiling at the gate agent, at the universe, at the story that existed only in his head. On the plane, I stared at the in-flight map, tracking a dotted line over the Atlantic, and remembered the first time Jules, and I ate midnight noodles on my studio floor, spreadsheets fanned like a hand of cards. You're allowed to want more than competence, she told me. You're allowed to want joy. When I launched Atlas and Ivy, she baked a cake that collapsed in the middle and we filled the crater with raspberries. We called it the pivot. Grant slept. I wrote a list on the back of the summons card while the cabin lights dimmed. Leverage, documentation, witnesses, cash. It wasn't a revenge plan, it was an oxygen plan. My mother's voice braided with my own, timing and proof, girl. Charles de Gaulle came at us with fluorescent dawn. The car Victoria's assistant booked had the wrong child seat configuration. I fixed it with a phone call while Grant told a story about rugby to a driver who didn't care. The city slid past, graffiti and slate, iron balconies, boulangeries stacking their first croissants. At Le Bristol, a bellman said my name correctly and I wanted to hug him. In the suite, Grant kissed my forehead like a man qualifying for sainthood. Dad wants me for breakfast, he said. Mom needs me to say the right thing about donors and Monet. You'll check the museum. It's what I do, I said. He left whistling. I stared at the door until the air stilled, then opened my laptop and uploaded the screenshots to a private vault, tagging dates, numbers, hotel names that showed up in the threads. The pattern was a network map. Celeste's rehearsals at the opera, his business trips that weren't, her doctor's appointments blurring into donor lunches on his calendar so neatly you could mistake them for legitimacy. My phone buzzed. Jules, you land, tell me everything. Send me a photo of the garden. I want to hate her flowers in real time. I smiled despite myself, took a picture of the luggage mess, and typed, arrived. I'll swing by Rawdon after I charm 3 concierges and convince humidity to leave Victoria's hair alone. Queen behavior, Jules wrote. Hey, also, random, did you ever sign that addendum Vic's lawyer sent? Claire was panicking about paperwork. My scalp prickled. What addendum? The one about assets and crisis comms. She added a shrug emoji. Maybe I'm mixing it up. Ignore me, send peonies. I put the phone down, picked it up, and tried to locate the version of my friend that asked that question without malice. Once upon a time, we'd built crash plans together. Once upon a time, she would have told me to set fire to a seating chart that didn't include my name. Renee met me at the museum gate, all charm and apology. Madam Whittaker adjusted the table to 12, he said, eyes sympathetic. But we have a spare Louis chair in the office that's seen worse politics. I'll handle it, I said. Hold the chair, don't place it. He tipped his head like he understood the math of grace. On the way back to the hotel, my phone chimed again. Jules, a new message in our thread. It was a forward, not to me but through me, as if her thumb had slipped. FWD, Paris schedule /notes, Maya's updates. The top line showed another recipient before me, Victoria Whittaker. Below, my own words from an hour earlier unfurled, vendor names, timing, the part where I wrote I'll handle it about the chair. A second bubble arrived, Jules again. Oops, wrong thread. Ignore that, babe, fat fingers. I stood on the sidewalk while a delivery truck exhaled bread smell into the street, while a boy balanced baguettes like batons, while Paris acted like I hadn't just watched my best friend hand my playbook to the opposing team. The screen brightened in the noon sun. The message glared. Somewhere upstairs a clock chimed 12, and I counted to 10 like I used to when I was a child, trying not to break the single nice thing we owned. By the second morning, the word family had become a velvet rope I kept bumping into. It was on the breakfast sign in the Bristol's private salon, Whittaker family only, in a font that pretended to be gracious. It was in the group text I could see over Grant's shoulder, family lunch, family fittings, family donors. It had a way of turning me into staff inside my own marriage. Grant left at 7 with a kiss and a lie, quick bite with dad, and I toured the day like a foreman, confirm refrigeration for the seafood course at Rawdon, nudge the yacht captain about the piano tuner, check the rain plan load in with Renee. The app's dashboard looked like a runway lit for landing. I wanted to be proud of that. I wanted to be a woman whose competence didn't get mistaken for consent. At 10, Melissa intercepted me in the lobby, glossy in white linen with a shopping bag already swinging from her wrist. We're doing a family run to Avenue Montaigne, she said. Mom wants to see the fall lines before everyone else. You'd be bored. I'm never bored, I said. Still, she chirped. Why don't you know? She made a fluttering hand motion that encompassed vendors, hair, and the entire unglamorous engine beneath their glamour. Work, I asked. She smiled with all her teeth. Your gift. The concierge called Madam Whittaker and 2 people turned. The other one had the last name first. Outside, Paris did its best impersonation of a postcard. Inside, a florist delivered peonies so perfect they offended me. I caught Victoria at the front desk, voice low but calibrated to carry. The dinner is 12, she told the concierge. Not 13. Our son's wife will help with arrivals but won't be staying. If she has questions, direct her to Claire. The concierge nodded with the practiced neutrality of a man who had seen richer families do pettier things. My phone buzzed. Jules, don't let the buttocks parade rattle you. Send me a seating chart so I can roast their place cards in peace. I typed, hold your fire. There's a number I need to fix before we talk about paper stock. I hovered, then added, are you okay? You sounded weird yesterday. She replied fast. Allergies, I'm fine. I love you, you're unstoppable. Love felt like a word we were both borrowing. At Rawdon, Renee walked me through the garden while installers measured light with their palms. Madam Whittaker confirmed the 12, he said, gently. Course we can place a 13th if you say the word. Hold, I said. Do not place, not yet. He raised an eyebrow. You are conducting a symphony with very quiet gestures. Loud ones get you thrown out of the orchestra, I said. We ran contingencies, a storm front rumored for late evening, the generators hum, the path servers would take to avoid donors who believed servers were ghosts. I signed off on florals, changed the height of the taper candles, and added a second champagne station in case Mercy needed a line. Work lifted the panic from my chest the way running sometimes lifts grief, temporary sweaty relief that at least proves your body still functions. Back at the hotel, Claire, sweet, tired Claire, waylaid me by the elevators with a sheaf of paper like a white flag. She moved the donor's breakfast to the museum's garden cafe, she whispered. It's not a cafe, it's a bench and a plaque. Also, she sent me a spreadsheet for you to translate into the thingy your company uses. Also, she says 12. You're doing great, I said, taking the papers. Drink water, blink. She blinked obediently. I escaped to the business center where nobody wore linen. The computers were a decade old, but the Wi-Fi was mean and fast. I opened the shared link I'd built for the family, the one I'd been spoon-feeding them with calendar holds and location pins. A red banner flashed, owner changed. Whitaker and Hale admin. The grid loaded like a bright city at night. My initials, MTW, used to pepper the margins. MTW to confirm florist, MTW on yacht load-in, MTW holds. Asterisk they had been replaced by CW Claire, VW Victoria, sometimes A Edward. In the comments, someone Victoria, I'd bet my company had typed, remove access for M. Clean chain of command. The thread timestamped 5 minutes earlier. Below it, a second note, final count 12. Non-negotiable. I clicked my own name in the share panel. Viewer. My chest went cold like I'd swallowed dry ice. I tried to nudge a time block, permission denied. I tried to leave a comment, permission denied. I tried to revoke a donor's +1 I knew would turn into a public scene, permission denied. A door opened behind me. Victoria's perfume arrived a beat before she did. She stepped into the frame of the doorway like a woman entering a portrait. Working? She asked lightly. Always, I said. You do make life look so managed, she said. It's a rare gift. Not everyone is made for rooms. Some of us are made for the machinery behind them. Luckily, I built the machinery, I said. Her smile thinned. We're simplifying for Paris. Family is delicate. Optics are everything. It helps to have clean edges. Edges cut, I said, if you aren't careful. Then don't stand too close, she said, as if we were discussing the placement of votives instead of my presence at her table. You'll attend arrivals and then take a well-earned evening. It's kinder that way. Kinder for whom? I asked. For everyone, she said, the word everyone doing the kind of work family did when it wanted to lie. She left on a breeze of violets. I stared at the screen until the cursor went to sleep. The red banner blinked out. The settings were now locked. My phone chimed with a bank alert from a number I'd memorized without trying. Whitaker and Hale, communication regarding facility adjustments. Another vendor payment pending, alternate guarantee requested. My corporate line graph ticked higher on my app. I could feel the interest accruing like a tide licking at my ankles. I messaged Renee, proceed as planned. Do not add the 13th. Keep a chair within reach. He sent back a single word, compress. Jules texted again, pick a dress that looks like armor. I almost wrote pick a friend who isn't leaking your life, but I deleted it. Instead, black, sharp, comfortable shoes. Where the heels, she shot back. Let them hear you coming. In the lobby, Melissa waved a garment bag like a flag. We found the most divine midnight silk, she sang. Mom says black tie looks best when it hurts a little. Pain looks good on no one, I said. Spoken like someone who hasn't paid dues, she said, then caught herself, then didn't apologize. I rode the elevator alone and watched my reflection fracture in the mirrored panels. 12 Mayas, then 1. In the room, I spread the papers on the bed. The new schedule with my initials erased. The donor's breakfast relocated to a bench. The florist notes that sounded like orders. I should have been angrier. Instead, I felt the strange calm of a person counting breaths in a burning room. I opened Atlas and Ivy again and scrolled through our guarantees, the quiet spine of the week. My company still held the keys. They had changed the names on the doors. They hadn't noticed who installed the locks. The shared link pinged one last time with a notification I didn't expect. V70 Paris, moved to a new folder. Family/final/internal. Comment appeared, timestamped and bare. Maya to handle arrivals only. Remove after. Grant never locked his briefcase. Men who'd always had doors open for them forget doors have locks. He left it slouched against the tufted chair like a tired animal when he rushed to meet Edward for another family breakfast. Back in an hour, he said, kissing the air near my temple. The door clicked. Silence widened. I stared at the case long enough to pretend I wasn't going to touch it. Then I touched it. The brass latches lifted with a small, traitorous joy. Inside, legal leather folders, a Montblanc, a brochure from a watch boutique I couldn't afford, and a sheaf of paper with a tab that read remarks. V70 in a handwriting I recognized from place cards and pity notes, Victoria's. I slid the pages free like bones. The first document wore a firm's letterhead that smelled of Harvard and generational comfort. Talking points, family remarks v. Whitaker 70th, Musée Rodin. Below, bullet points in a courtroom's voice. Open with gratitude and legacy. Acknowledge mutual decision of Grant and Maya to separate, timing chosen to minimize disruption. Emphasize continued respect and friendship. Ask for privacy, redirect attention to philanthropy. My name sat there in 12-point, a complication smoothed into optics. I read the paragraph they'd scripted for him, the little applause lines, the softened verbs. We have chosen. We remain close. We ask your discretion. A carefully calibrated obituary for a marriage pronounced by a room high on champagne. I couldn't hear the air conditioning. I could hear my own pulse. Behind the talking points came a cleaner blade, prenuptial addendum, crisis communications, and asset carve-out. The dates tugged at my breath. Drafted 2 months ago. Reviewed by both parties. Signature lines at the bottom, Grant Whittaker in his easy diagonal and Maya Tran Whittaker in someone else's dream of my hand. I set the paper down because the room tilted. They hadn't forged it, they weren't that stupid, but the shape of the plan fit neatly around the space where a signature was supposed to go, like a tailored dress waiting for a body. Schedules for transition announcements. A clause that would obligate me to use their PR team. Language that laundered cruelty into collaboration. A list of assets, pre-allocated to legacy interests, with the confidence of people who had never been told no. Underneath, a final document, mutual non-disclosure agreement, effective post-announcement, with a date 1 week in the future and a penalty schedule that climbed like a staircase designed for falling. There, in a neutral, bloodless font, was the price of my silence. The Mont Blanc rolled. I caught it by reflex. My mother used to say, when a man shows you his tools, find the blueprint. I laid the papers out on the bed in order, remarks, addendum. NDA then took photographs that framed the letterheads, the dates, the metadata in the page footers my old event lawyer had taught me to look for. I forwarded the files to the vault I'd opened for Celeste's messages, tagged, Paris/exit-script/assets/comms. My phone buzzed Jules. Brunch update. Did Vic cry when the croissants were crooked? I typed and deleted 3 versions of Are you feeding her my oxygen? And settled on, working. You okay? Dots. Nothing. The screen went blank like a closed eye. I found another folder tucked into the pocket, handwritten notes on creamy paper. Victoria's tidy rows of letters, the kind that look like discipline and read like control. At the top, V70 remarks sequencing. Then, grant after dessert, not before. Use mutual 3 times. Mention transition advisors by name. If she reacts, escort to car via service corridor, Claire to manage. Make her think it was her choice. I sat on the edge of the bed and laughed, a small, unpretty sound. Of course there was a service corridor. Of course there was a word count for mutual. Of course Claire, kind Claire, had been assigned the choreography of my disappearance. The room smelled faintly of violets. The perfume had colonized the upholstery. I thought of my mother rolling roses in tissue at 2 a.m. Her hands nicked, her eyes stubborn, saying, "We don't beg people to buy our flowers. We make them want them." I thought of the first time Grant held my wrist like it was something rare and said, "You make chaos behave." I thought of how many times I'd forgiven him for mistaking my work for my worth. The door rattled. Housekeeping called bonjour and I croaked it back, throat dusted in paper and disbelief. I read the script a second time, this time with a red pen from my bag, the way I mark run of shows before a show tries to run over me. I circled mutual. I underlined privacy. I wrote no in the margins, small at first, then larger. I flipped the NDA and wrote, "Counter, I keep what's mine. You keep what you can carry without my help." Ridiculous to negotiate with a paper no one had handed me, but it steadied the vertigo. My phone lit with Renee, storm cell tracking east, may graze us by 21H, generators ready. Final count still 12, hold course, I wrote. And Renee, if a woman in midnight silk asks for the service corridor, let her choose the direction. A knock, the briefest pause where a life decides. Grant's voice through the door. Sugar over hurry. You decent? I left my notes. I lifted the papers, slid them back into the folder, placed the folder on top as if I were a good wife returning a husband's homework. I opened the door. He was bright with the confidence of men who think rooms belong to them. "Dad's on the phone with the bank, everything's fine," he said, breezing in. "Mom wants to see your dress. She's pretending not to care, which means she'll combust if it's wrong." He reached for the folder, our fingers brushed. "What's that?" I asked, calm like a frozen lake. "Just logistics," he said. "Little speech pieces, family stuff." "Family," I said, like a foreign word I didn't plan to learn. He kissed my cheek and lifted the briefcase. "You're amazing," he said. "Tonight is going to be beautiful." "It is," I said, because beauty and brutality have always been cousins, and because I had my own remarks now, written in a language Victoria didn't speak. He left whistling. I closed the door, leaned my forehead against the wood, and let the quiet answer. On the bed, a corner of Victoria's note peeked from the folder like a white tooth. I pulled it free and read the last line again until the words lost shape and became a dare. Make her think it was her choice. I woke before the city and lay still, listening to Paris breathe through the window seams. I thought about the word mutual printed 3 times in a font that had never met me. I thought about the service corridor Claire was meant to guide me through, quiet, invisible, grateful. I let the thoughts pass like trains. Then I got up and went to work. Grant's iPad still wore my fingerprints. His mail opened without a password because in this house trust was a screensaver. Search bar, fingers steady. Aiden Park/transfer, offshore, Harrogate, carve out. The results stacked, polite as elevator strangers. One thread had the gray, damp feel of bad weather. From Aiden P. to Edward Grant. Interim liquidity pre-announcement. Move non-core inventory to Harrogate Holdings, BVI by Friday COB. Rathbone Plains LLC to receives as custodian. Delay vendor wires, optics matter more than invoices. Keep spousal access off distro. Legal finalizing addendum. I screenshotted dates, headers, footers, the little blue down arrow that proves a thread existed before anyone pretends it didn't. Into the vault, they went with Celeste's messages and Victoria's script. Tags, BVI/custodian/spousal block. Another email wore donor perfume. From Development Whitaker Fund to Victoria, subject, bridge from Prescott. Prescott will revisit pledge post Paris, requesting short-term facility quietly. Can we leverage Whitaker and Hale art for collateral without disclosure? I pictured a museum docent explaining a blank spot on a wall. This is where legacy used to hang. I pinched the trackpad to enlarge the attachment and found a spreadsheet titled Collateral, curated with a tab for liquidate without press. I saved it. The vault accepted everything, a hungry little god. Atlas and Ivy chimed from my phone with 2 new vendor pings, soft words that mean hard things. Alternative guarantee, please advise, prior card non-responsive. I wrote back from my professional voice, confirmed. Our guarantee stands. See attached rider. Then I pushed deposits through our corporate line, tagging them in red. The utilization graph climbed, rain at the ankles. I called the Bristol concierge desk and asked for a copy of the Rodden access list to be left at the business center printer for arrivals management. It wasn't a lie, exactly. On the way down, I dialed Aiden. Park, he answered, clipped as if he'd been born into consonants. This is Maya. A beat. Everything all right with the birthday circus. I'm confirming vendors for the week. Some are asking for alternate guarantees. Might be a glitch on your end. Glitches happen, he said. Vendors can be needy, we'll smooth it. Say that on email. I'm on the move, he said. Shoot your questions to legal. So that's a no, I said, almost kindly. Maya, he lowered his voice into confidential. There are grown-up conversations you don't want to be part of. You're doing great with the flowers and ghosts. Let the firm handle the rest. Copy, I said. Last thing, remind me which entity is Rathbone Plains. Delaware, yes. Custodian for what again? Silence opened like a trap door. Stay in your lane, he said, and ended the call. I wrote what he wouldn't say into my notes. Rathbone equals parking lot for assets. Then I emailed myself the hotel's printer confirmation and watched the machine spit out the Rodden access list with my name still labeled Coordinator Master. It occurred to me that Victoria could demote me in a spreadsheet all day. The contracts recognized a different sovereign. At lunch, the lobby filled with the champagne laugh of people who never pay for champagne. Melissa waved from a couch like a woman in a catalog. Edward stood near the window speaking low and urgent into his phone, the word facility clipping his sentences. Victoria issued weather reports dressed as orders. Humidity at 62, move hair to 4, donors at 6, dessert by 9, Grant's remarks after. After, I murmured. Not before. In my room, I turned the desk into a war table. Legal script, donor IOUs, offshore threads, collateral lists. I built a timeline on hotel stationery the way I build run of shows, every move labeled, every delay costed. Who knew what at which hour with what paper? Proof isn't revenge, it's oxygen. Revenge burns out, proof keeps you breathing while the room goes to smoke. My mother called as if she'd felt my pulse across the Atlantic. How's Paris? She asked, cutting stems under a Massachusetts sky I could see in my head. Pretty, I said, and rude. You are pretty and rude when needed, she said. You keep receipts, that way if they say you are crazy, you pay with truth. I am not paying for anything, I said and meant it. Good girl. Her knife clicked against wood. Remember, people who inherit rooms think rooms protect them, but rooms have doors, doors have knobs. Some even have locks, I said, and we both laughed softly, like people in a chapel. After we hung up, I opened the Atlas and Ivy admin portal, permissions nobody in the Whitaker family even knew existed, because none of them had bothered to read the terms they signed. The Guarantees tab unfurled like a ledger. Musée Rodden Atlas and Ivy Corporate. Sane Charter, Atlas and Ivy Corporate. Rhymes Mason, Atlas and Ivy Corporate. Hair/makeup, Atlas and Ivy Corporate. Lighting, Atlas and Ivy Corporate. In the rightmost column, the little toggle I'd built for crisis management glowed a soft, unthreatening blue. Reversal eligible/vendor notified within 30 m. I scrolled until the list ended and found no break, no loophole, no place where they could wedge a promise under my door and pry it open. My company's name repeated like a drumline down the page. The line of blue toggles looked like a runway ready to light. My phone buzzed with a final vendor message, confirming headcount, 12. I typed, hold at 12 for now. Do not add, keep one chair within reach. Then I set down the phone, drew a breath that didn't tremble, and tapped the audit trail button for satisfaction. The time stamps, the signatures, the chain of custody Victoria couldn't edit out of her life. I didn't promise myself anything about tonight. I didn't script the moment. I just looked at the screen until its truth anchored me. Atlas and Ivy's dashboard lined my company name under every Paris booking, one unbroken column of leverage the family hadn't noticed, because they never counted me when it mattered. By 8, the garden had the kind of light you can only rent. Strings of bulbs swung between plane trees, bronze shoulders gleamed, waiters moved like commas at the edge of perfect sentences. Paris was a held breath. I zipped the midnight silk armor that looked like surrender and pressed a finger to the small bump of my earpiece out of habit before remembering. Tonight I was not staff or family, only a problem being handled. Renee met me at the museum's side gate, tuxedo crisp, sympathy tucked neatly behind professionalism. Madam Tran Whitaker, he said, because he had decided to say all of me. Everything is as specified. As I specified, I said. His mouth tilted. He lowered his voice. The 13th chair is within reach, but invisible to certain eyes. Keep it that way, I said. This isn't a furniture problem. From the hedges, we watched the table bloom into a white, moon-bright circle of 12. Place cards stood at attention. Peonies held their breath. Tapers waited to be lit by a man who looked like he'd been born holding matches. A storm cell muttered somewhere above the city. The generator purred like a cat in the shrubbery. Victoria entered to applause, a vapor trail of emerald silk. Edward followed, face waxed with good cheer and strain. Melissa floated, all cheekbones and litigation-ready smile. Donors unfolded themselves into relevance. Grant came last with the promise of a hand at my back, performative, almost tender, the way men perform tenderness when someone's filming with their eyes. Midnight, he said, eyes traveling in the polite, proprietary way I'd learned to hate. You look, counted, I asked. He swallowed. Let's have an easy night. Then count correctly, I said. We crossed the gravel together. Claire hovered near the service corridor, holding a tablet like a shield, eyes flitting from me to Victoria as if she alone were responsible for gravity. I wanted to kiss her forehead and send her home to sleep for a week. At the table, a place where my name should have been was a smooth, white absence. No card, no setting, no accident. A black clutch lay in the empty space like a tombstone. A donor's wife had thought better of it and moved. Even objects were smarter than this family. Victoria turned just enough. Oh, she said, delicate as poison, we must have miscounted. Renee stood a beat too far to intervene. Staff watched the way birds watch a cat. Seems I'm not family, I said, not loud, not small. A shudder sound went off in someone's brain. Melissa's mouth did the thing it does before gossip. Edward cleared his throat in a key meant to reset rooms. Donors rearranged their faces into benign interest. Grant half rose, palm out, rehearsed concern moving across his features like weather. Maya, he said, warm. Don't do this, it's just a rehearsal, I offered. A mistake, he said. Then make it correct, I said. Name a chair's owner aloud. He looked at Victoria the way sons look when they're 10 and their mother holds the car keys. She lifted a brow. Renegotiate the moon, the brow said, but not the number of stars. It's better if, Grant began. For optics, I said. For dessert, for speech after. Silence spread out, white and cruel like linen. This was the part of the script where I was supposed to cry or raise my voice or compel an uncle to soothe me toward the corridor. The service door stood ajar, Claire's hand a tremble against the frame. She mouthed, I'm sorry. I believed her. I smoothed my skirt the way women do when they decide not to bleed where someone else can see. If I'm not counted, I said steady, I'm not covering the count. Victoria's smile held. We have it handled, she said. You never did, I said, and stepped backward off their planet. The bulbs hummed, the bronze kept shining. Behind me, the magnolias smelled like something that had decided to live anyway. I felt eyes in my scapulae, the prickle of a dozen opinions curdling into legend. The gravel under my heels sounded like hail. Grant followed to the lip of the path. Maya, for God's sake. Your God sits at table 12, I said, not turning. Be reasonable, he hissed. We'll talk after Mom's remarks. After dessert. After my funeral. Don't make a scene, he said. Then stop staging one, I said and kept walking. At the gate, I handed my claim tag to a guard who looked at me like he wanted to apologize for everyone wealth had ever taught him to obey. The street was humid with scooter noise and bread. I crossed to the cafe with the tin tables and the stubborn barista who hates tourists exactly as much as I do when they're cruel to servers. "Un espresso," I said, and my voice didn't shake. The cup came hot and devout. I set my phone on the saucer's rim the way I'd practiced in my head a dozen times since the first vendor pinged non-responsive. Atlas and Ivy lit, polite as ever, waiting for instruction like a dog who knows all the tricks. Timer, 30 minutes. Toggle 1, rod and guarantee reversal. A confirmed dialogue, are you sure? Vendor will require alternate payment at table. Yes. Yes, I was sure, tap. The app throbbed once, processing. The barista banged metal somewhere out of frame, punctuation for a sentence no one else could hear. Across the street, a toast detonated. Crystal did its tiny gunfire. Victoria lifted her glass. A donor lifted his reputation to meet hers. The generator purred. A gust of wind worried the tapers. A server covered a flame with his palm, the quiet heroism of small fires being tended. My phone purred back. Reversal executed. Vendor notified. I exhaled. The first bead of sweat slid at my spine and cooled as if the app had blown on me. I toggled the sane charter next. Reversal within 30 m. Yes, then rhymes. Then hair and makeup. Then lighting. Each confirmation was a vowel in a new language I had chosen to learn tonight. In my head, I saw lines of code, saw my junior dev on a milk crate in a warehouse long ago, saw my mother's hands tying ribbon until the bow remembered it was beautiful. A chain of women who made chaos do push-ups. Grant's name buzzed the screen. I turned the phone face down and watched our reflection in the cafe window. Me, a small, steady thing, the museum behind me, all lit bones and borrowed legacy. Another buzzed Jules. Where are you? Then, before I could answer, don't panic. Stay put, I'm fixing something. Fixing. My mouth went dry. Fixing could mean anything from lipstick to a leak. I lifted the phone. Atlas and Ivy gave me a fresh confirmation, and beneath it, a banner I hadn't expected. External access request. V. Whitaker. Emergency, override with a red button pulsing deny/allow. She'd found the doorbell to my house. She was pressing it with both hands. Behind the glass, the garden caught a new shape at the periphery. A woman at the gate, hand on her abdomen, hair pinned for the opera, face I recognized from a photo bubble the morning we flew out. She was early or deliberately on time for a story that required my absence. Celeste lifted a palm to the guard. He checked the list. He let her in. The timer moved like a second hand with an attitude. 29, 58, 57. I cupped the espresso and worked the list the way I've always worked disasters, quietly with labels. Atlas and Ivy's dashboard blinked its polite blues. Sane charter right arrow reversal. Are you sure? Yes, executed, vendor notified. A text slid in from the captain. All river charm, Madam Maya, regrettable. We await alternate payment from Monsieur Whitaker. Enjoy the roses tonight. Rhymes Mason right arrow reversal. The sommelier replied with a little heartbreak emoji and a line about honoring our relationship by honoring our policies. Deposits pulsed backwards, line by red line, into my corporate account. Money I'd floated returning like tide obeying the moon it actually knows. Private Vatican guide, right arrow cancel/reschedule. Cancel. The reply was a Roman shrug in text form. We have seen stranger confessions. Refund processed. Hair and makeup team right arrow reverse retainer. The lead artist sent a kissy face and call me when you're doing films instead of families. Refund hit. Vintage cars to champagne right arrow reverse. We suspected, the dispatcher wrote. Merci for the early signal. Funds back. 26 minutes. Across the street, the garden became the kind of night people remember for years for the wrong reason. Celeste surfaced inside the hedge line, hand on the curve of not yet. Escorted like a revelation. René clocked her. His mouth didn't move, but the lines at the corners said he knew which opera was about to begin. Jules, where are you? Me, cafe, across. Jules, stay put. Me, you forwarding Vic my updates. Dots. Jules, I'm getting you out clean. Trust me, okay. Trust had been a floor I'd already fallen through. I put the phone flat and watched the museum glow like bones under skin. Villa in Champagne weekend right arrow reverse. Carmen, the manager, wrote, sad to miss you, Bella. The tip for staff will be returned separately. You always think of the dishwashers. Respect. I swallowed the lump that tried to climb my throat. Respect is a currency heavy enough to pay rent. Drivers for donor transfers right arrow reverse/reassign. Reverse. Paris would Uber them. Pride could share a back seat with surge pricing. Lighting and generator right arrow reverse backup. I let the primary hum stay. I'm not a monster. but the extra pack that made the garden look like a magazine off. Understood, came the text reply. You were always the honest one. 22 minutes. Grant called, I declined. He texted, I didn't read. The app pipped again, the good sound showing my utilization dropping as refunds landed. Clean math, clean oxygen. A new banner edged the screen like a shadow. Emergency override, Victoria Whittaker via Jules Hart. Requests admin access to V70. Allow/deny. Jules. The world went soundless for half a beat. My finger hovered and my stomach did the small, traitorous tilt a body does when it recognizes a cliff. I hit deny. The banner returned with a different mask. Emergency override, Edward Whittaker via WNH admin. Requests admin access to V70. Deny, Aiden Park via vendor arbitration. Deny, 3 denials in 15 seconds. Either they were in the same room or they had built a room inside my company long before tonight where my name was a guest without keys. 20 minutes. Renee, timing. Me, after first course is down and champagne refilled. Renee, a kindness. Me, a mirror. Another vendor pinged. Prescott office. Donor Transport tried to substitute their card on the Rome day trip I'd quietly secured far, far in advance as a post-Paris flex. Wrong city, boys. Booking no longer exists, I wrote. Please contact Whittaker and Hale. I toggled one more line. Monet private viewing /Dorsey liaison right arrow reverse. And the curator wrote back with airy brutality. Punctuality is our love language. We expect alternate payment at once. I almost laughed. The art world and I finally spoke the same dialect. 16 minutes. Across the street, the first course landed. Imported ostra that tastes like money trying to apologize. Victoria sparkled in emerald and relief. Her glance told me she thought the worst was behind her. Edward stared at his phone as if it might grow a bailout. Melissa whispered into the air between her and a donor like a snake charmer. Claire hovered one pace away from Victoria, mouth in a line that said she had searched for a 13th chair twice since I left and found the emptiness intentional. Grant's text tone, because of course he had a special tone, piped again. Come back, Mom's upset, we can fix this. I watched the dots form and vanish like a man rehearsing lies out loud. Another message followed, different energy, please, it's bigger than tonight. Bigger had arrived already. 14 minutes. Atlas and Ivy issued a tidy ledger, refunds to Atlas and Ivy corporate complete. I opened my bank app and watched numbers inhale. We're okay. My finance manager wrote, you're inverse robbing a bank. Try to sleep before 40. Working, I typed. 12. I added one petty thing because I am human. Bakery tour for Melissa's family morning, right arrow reverse. The baker wrote C'est la vie and added a note about how children don't notice when adults make the world meaner. Celeste tilted toward Grant. He leaned as if gravity had an opinion. Her mouth formed a small O as a kick met his palm through couture. Victoria saw and glowed with the kind of love that measures bloodlines in advance. Edward checked the time again. The storm grumbled in a distant arrondissement, undecided. 10. Renee ready, me proceed in 5, approach Edward first, then announce softly to table. Keep it merciful, Renee, mercy is policy. 8. Hotel car block for airport day right arrow reverse. The concierge wrote, understood. We will require prepayment from Whittaker party at checkout. Music to my lungs. 6. My phone buzzed with a different vibration, 2-step verification. Someone was trying a backdoor into Atlas and Ivy through a legacy admin account I hadn't used in a year. The screen lit, password reset requested Jules Hart. I breathed once twice, hit deny, and toggled require physical key. The system chirped, security posture elevated. 3. I sent Renee a single go. He stepped from the hedge line with the benign smile of a man about to deliver a baby or a bomb. 2 stewards flanked him, tablets in hand. He leaned to Edward first, their heads bent together in a hush that had nothing to do with romance. Edward's face did that expensive thing where color drains without permission. He gestured toward a card. Renee shook his head. Tablets tilted. Claire moved instinctively, like a small bird bracing in wind. Victoria set down her fork. Is something amusing? She asked, tone lacquered. Renee straightened, apologized the way French people apologize when they know they're right, and addressed the table as if reciting a poem. From the cafe, I couldn't hear the words, only their shape. Donors' faces shifted from bemused to alert. Melissa's spine stiffened. Grant reached for his jacket. Celeste touched the rim of her water glass and didn't drink. My phone vibrated with the message I had timed my breathing to, aroma/Rodden, primary guarantee revoked. Alternate payment required immediately to continue service. The second message landed a heartbeat later, from an unexpected direction, the bank I'd seen in Edward's emails all week. Whittaker and Hale, facility freeze, temporary hold pending review. Across the street, Edward's wallet remained open but suddenly useless. Victoria's hand went to her throat, where a vintage Cartier bracelet sat pretty as a lifeboat. Message from the bank sat on my screen like a stop sign. Whitaker and Hale, facility freeze, temporary hold pending review. I didn't breathe, I watched. Across the street, Renee eased toward the head of the table with 2 stewards and a tablet. He bent to Edward first, the quiet courtesy of letting a man fail privately before the world knows. Edward's smile unpinned itself. He tried one card, then another, a third. Renee shook his head the way you shake it at a thundercloud. Air drifted closer, clutching her tablet with both hands like it could pray. Victoria barely tilted her face. Is there some confusion? She asked in a voice that assumed confusion lived only in other people. Alas, madam, Renee said. The guarantee we had on file is no longer with us. We require an alternate method to continue service. Run Whitaker and Hale, Edward said, pushing plastic like a man bribing fate. We did, Renee replied, not unkind. It declined and then it sighed. Donors felt the temperature drop and started pretending they hadn't. Melissa lifted her chin 1/8 of an inch, outwardly serene, internally in a burning building. A man with a surname that opens doors checked his watch, which is how men say make this stop without moving their mouths. Grant, Victoria said, and the way she said his name was a command disguised as maternal concern. Grant pulled out his wallet like every son who has ever wanted to be a bridge. We'll sort it, he told Renee, shooting me a look he couldn't possibly aim this far across Paris. It's a formality. Renee glanced at the tablet. The total for the evening, including service and gratuity, stands at, he named a number Victoria would tell people was vulgar if it belonged to someone else. Run it, Grant said. Renee nodded to the steward. The steward swiped. The tablet thought about it and returned a judgment that made Grant blink. He tried again. The tablet was consistent. A little silence opened in the garden where birds should be. Victoria smiled like a person in a portrait. It appears, she said, we are experiencing a banking hiccup. Would you take a wire first thing in the morning? Renee's face performed the art of service with dignity. With sincere regret, madam, our policy requires tender now or collateral of equivalent value left with us until funds arrive. A woman 2 seats down murmured, collateral, as if the word belonged to people who buy furniture in monthly installments, not to people who name auditoriums. Victoria's hand went to her wrist, instinct, muscle memory, story. The bracelet sat there, fat with history, antique Cartier, tutti-frutti, sapphires sulking next to emeralds that made their own light. She unclasped it with practiced fingers and set it on the linen between her knife and the future. Will this do? She asked, almost bored. Renee did not touch it. We would require documentation to hold such an heirloom properly. A receipt against the total, of course. The kitchen must continue. The kitchen waited, listening through a door. Edward pressed his lips together until they threatened to disappear. Fine, he said. Receipt it, Claire, handle it. Claire's eyes glossed. She nodded like a soldier who learns to salute while ducking. Melissa leaned toward a donor, voice a curative whisper. It's Paris, they're dramatic. We're just protecting them from a chargeback. The donor smiled the way rich men smile when the story benefits them. My phone buzzed. Jules, do not come back, not yet. I'm trying to shut down a backdoor Vic found through a vendor Claire hired. You're safe, I'm sorry. Are you sorry to me or to her? I typed, then deleted it. Which backdoor? Long story, she wrote. I thought I was helping you. Vic said she'd keep you from getting dragged. I dots, then nothing. Renee lifted the bracelet with a cloth like a relic. The room exhaled. Service resumed, but softer, like a band that knew the headliner just pulled out. Donors bent their heads together and whispered philanthropy into one another's ears as if generosity could launder embarrassment. Grant checked his phone. Calling, my screen announced with his full name because there had been a time when that had felt like a gift. I let it buzz twice, 3 times. The 4th time I answered. Where are you? He said low and hard. Outside, I said. Where you put me. You made your point, he said. Come back, we'll find a corner, we'll smooth tonight and talk tomorrow. You can't afford tomorrow, I said. Don't do this, he hissed. There are people here, Mom. Seems I'm not family, I said. His breath kited against the phone. Maya, for the love of look, I'm putting you on speaker. Don't, I said, but I heard the little click of a room getting invited into our marriage. Maya. Victoria's voice, precise and civil, came across like a courtroom mic. We seem to have a misunderstanding with the restaurant. Your expertise would be a beat, welcome. I pictured the bracelet receipt sitting on a silver tray near the kitchen door. I pictured the yacht captain refreshing his inbox. I pictured the sommelier in rhymes telling his staff to go home early, shrugging into his jacket with a complicated kind of relief. I pictured Celeste's hand resting lightly on the future and wished her a better one than mine. Here's my expertise, I said even. I reversed every deposit atlas and Ivy floated. The museum, the yacht, the cars, the hair, the lighting, the guide in Rome. The vendors have their policies, I have mine. A ripple of silence traveled the table. I could hear glass nodes chiming where people forgot their fingers. Maya, Edward said, trying statesman, be reasonable. This is a celebration, you don't want to. Edward, I said, your facility is frozen. Someone swore, soft and expensive. Who told you that? He asked, instinctively offended at the idea of information not obeying him. The same people who told you no, I said. Grant's voice nodded. We can fix this if you come back and we act like adults. You had a script for my disappearance in your briefcase, I said. Adults use their names when they talk about endings. Victoria, a donor interjected, forgetting to mute his own conscience. Perhaps we should reschedule dessert. Dessert, Victoria repeated slowly like it was a metaphor she might stab. No, let's not overreact, Melissa stage whispered into the open air. Overreact, I said, and even through a phone the word found its target. You built a play that ends with me escorted down a service corridor. You cut my name off your lists and called it kindness. Maya, Victoria said, all frost and cello, whatever grievances you have with my son. There with you, I said. On the line, I heard the small anxious sound Claire makes when she wants to leave her body. I imagined her eyes wet, guilty, good. Claire, I said, gentler than anyone at that table deserved, go home when you can. Maya, she whispered, and I realized the speaker was still on because a donor coughed like he'd swallowed a fish bone. Grant tried for the hush tone again. We will talk like people who loved each other once. Please, come back, we will figure this out. Look at me, I'm begging. You're performing, I said. Different than begging, better lighting. You're enjoying this, he said, and the old accusation flared, ambition, competence, audacity, pick your poison. No, I said, I'm breathing. Then what do you want? He asked, and I could feel the table lean toward the phone like flowers toward sun. What is the ask? Money, a number, name it. I want what's mine, I said, and I want you to pay your own bill. He made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a choke. Be serious. I am, I said, and let the line go quiet long enough to make space for all the years I had pretended not to be. Maya, Victoria said, softening her consonants into velvet, be a lady. I am, I said, and for once it wasn't a costume. Grant took the phone off speaker. I heard the quality change, and his voice came back smaller. We're dying here, he said. Please. I looked at the timer I'd set half an hour earlier. It blinked 0 like a finished race. Somewhere in the garden, the second course waited in a warm box for decision. The storm stalled over the far side of the city the way storms do when they want to watch. Enjoy the caviar while it lasts, I said, and hung up. I didn't run. I crossed the street like a person who had already decided who she was going to be when the room tried to decide for her. At the service gate, Renee was waiting, tuxedo immaculate, eyes kind. You wish to watch or to enter? He asked. To finish, I said. He led me through the corridor past racks of white plates and the hum of walk-ins. A chef looked up, clocked the fact that I belonged to the logistical, not the culinary gods, and went back to saving a sauce. We paused in the shadow of the hedges. The garden glittered with borrowed stars. The table glowed like an altar built to appetite. Renee took one step forward, then another, and the staff pulled back with the subtle choreography you only learn from years of serving people who think service is invisible. My heels kissed gravel. Heads turned the way flowers turn when a hand brushes past. Grant stood so fast his chair skittered. Maya, thank God. I'm not here for God, I said. I'm here for names. Victoria's smile didn't crack. How gracious of you to return. We're just addressing a minor inconvenience. Your bracelet looks expensive, I said. Collateral has a way of making minor things feel honest. A donor coughed into his napkin. Claire stared at me like she could keep me safe with her eyes. Melissa rolled a stem of rosemary between her fingers, the restless habit of someone who needs to touch something that can't sue. Edward attempted statesman. Whatever was miscommunicated between you and Claire about headcount, let's table it. The kitchen would like to proceed. The kitchen would, I said. So would the staff you made dress your embarrassment as normal. But the thing about rooms, they hold echoes. Grant's voice gentled, the way he always practiced with me. We'll fix the chair, Maya. The chair did exactly what it was told, I said. It's the script I'm fixing. I set my clutch on the linen and with both hands visible slid a single page from inside, a printout of the talking points, family remarks with a paragraph about a mutual decision highlighted in careful yellow. I didn't lift my voice. I didn't need to. The paper did the work. Where did you? Grant began. In your briefcase, I said. Next to the pen you use when you sign things for other people. And here, I laid down the second page, the prenuptial addendum, crisis communications and asset carve-out, the signatures blank where mine was supposed to be. You planned my exit. You timed it to your mother's applause line. A ripple moved the length of the table. People who had spent their lives training their faces blinked. One donor sipped water like it was news. Victoria didn't touch the papers. "You're angry," she said. "Of course you are, but this display is a correction," I said. "You don't get to cut my name out of your lists and call it kindness." "Sweetheart," she said, and the word was a knife with sugar on it. "We were protecting everyone from drama." "Here's the truth you can't launder," I said. Harrogate Holdings in the BVI. Rathbone Plains LLC as a custodian. A slush arrangement AITA labeled interim liquidity pre-announcement. A collateral tab literally titled curated for donors you call friends when you need them to act like banks. I built events out of air and paper. You built an entire life on optics. One of us was always going to be a better accountant. Aiden wasn't at the table, but half the heads turned reflexively toward where he would have been if he liked food more than spreadsheets. Edward's jaw did the controlled twitch of a man who wished the century would cooperate. Grant reached for my sleeve, as if proximity alone could persuade. "You're choosing the nuclear option. For what? To win a night? To end a year that should have ended itself," I said. A soft rustle at my left. Jules, of course, appearing from the service corridor with her hair pinned, a tablet hugged to her chest like a wrong decision. She had the careful face of someone who has been promised safety by the wrong general. "Jules," I said without turning fully, "pick a side that has a future." Her mouth opened. "Vic said," she stopped, swallowed. "Victoria said she could keep you out of the public parts. She said if I helped streamline access, you wouldn't." Her eyes begged me to fill the sentence with something kind. "She said a lot of things," I replied. "So did you? You forwarded my updates. You asked me about an addendum I never signed. You handed the fox a map to the henhouse and called it help." Jules flinched. I thought I was preventing a scene. "You built one," I said, but softer than I wanted to be. "Home, Jules, don't become a permanent character in this family's worst story." Victoria's smile thinned to thread. "You are making yourself small, Maya. This is beneath you." "Small was 12 chairs," I said. "This is scale." Grant, desperate now, "Name a number, we settle. We keep this elegant." There it was, the currency that had built their weather system. I almost pitied the reflex. "No," I said. "I keep what's mine, you keep what you can lift without my hands." Melissa exhaled a laugh that sounded like broken glass. "What's yours, exactly? The florist, the app, the clipboard?" "Atlas and Ivy," I said. "The guarantees you didn't notice were in my name. The refunds now sitting in my account, the receipts, my mother's flower shop you tried to make sound like a hobby. The years I spent making your rooms feel better than the people in them, that's mine." Edward leaned forward. "Threats won't age well. Facts don't wrinkle." I said. Around us, dinner tried to remember it was dinner. Forks found porcelain again. Somewhere in the kitchen, a pan flared and a chef swore in life, being rude went on. I lifted the papers back into my clutch. "I'm leaving," I said and faced Claire. "And when the room asks you to usher me down the service corridor, tell it no. Then go get some sleep. There's work that deserves you." Her eyes filled so fast she had to stare up at the bulbs to keep from spilling. She nodded. I turned to Victoria one last time. "You taught me something tonight," I said. "Rooms are powerful, but doors are sovereign. You don't own my walk." She tilted her chin, victorious even in retreat. "You'll regret this, or I'll remember it as the first honest thing I ever did with your name in the air." I stepped back. Grant's hand hovered, then fell. Celeste watched me with the calm of someone who has learned to stand very still while a storm chooses a direction. Her palm lay over her dress, a pulse kicked beneath it. For a second, ridiculous and true, I wished the baby kindness. The service corridor breathed cool night. Renee at my shoulder whispered, "We will send your regards to the generator." "Keep the kitchen fed," I said. "They're the only innocents here." My phone buzzed as if it had been holding its breath. "Unknown number, you don't know me. I'm not your enemy. Check your email." Another ping layered on top, forwarded, A, Park left right arrow E. Whitaker, collateral curated, / interim liquidity pre-announcement. I looked back once, not for them, but to mark the exact temperature of the air when a story changes shape. Then I slipped into the quiet where plates and decisions are stacked, and opened my email. The service corridor let me out into a Paris night that felt like a held breath finally exhaled. In the shadow of the museum stone, I opened the email the unknown number had promised. Subject lines stacked like accusations. Interim liquidity pre-announcement. FW collateral curated. Rathbone Plains custodian language. Headers were clean, metadata intact. Aiden to Edward, CC Grant. Line items about non-core inventory. A schedule for wires, a column literally titled Optics Risk. I pushed everything to the vault, then to my lawyer, then to a folder named Air because that's what proof buys you when rooms run out. At Le Bristol, the concierge handed me an envelope without looking at my face. "For Madam," he said, and walked like a man leaving a scene. Inside was the receipt for Victoria's bracelet, Renee's careful signature at the bottom, and the restaurant's crest embossed like a bruise. I took a photo, added it to the ledger, packed. By dawn, I was at Charles de Gaulle with a carry-on and the kind of quiet you only get after you refuse a script. Grant called. I let the phone buzz until the battery icon turned stingy. On the plane, I slept the way you sleep after a flood, light, ready, one hand on the doorknob in your dreams. Boston met me with sky the color of old paper. My mother brewed tea and cut stems and didn't ask questions she knew I would answer when my mouth remembered how. I kept receipts, I said. Good, she said. Receipts keep you. By midweek, the city that congratulates itself on discretion had begun to gossip in print. A tucked-away item in the Globe's names and news mentioned informal inquiries into Whittaker and Hale's client accounts. Nobody used the word investigation. They used prudence and review. Later that afternoon, a second piece appeared online, brief, careful, about unexpected collateralization of private assets at a Paris event. The bracelet had crossed the Atlantic faster than we did. My phone learned new ringtones. A reporter asked whether Atlas and Ivy had ever extended guarantees to cover third-party obligations at society functions. We follow contracts, I said, and we revoke them when contracts are ignored. A voice from a regulator left a message for my lawyer requesting context. 2 names quietly fell off the Whittaker board by close of business, replaced with a blankness that looked like good governance if you squinted. The vendors texted one by one, a chorus of practical mercy. Merci for the heads up, Maya. Refund received. We'll work with you again. We will require prepayment from them. The network had counted itself. The city had decided who did the math. Grant sent paragraphs that read like a man running downhill. I'm sorry, I panicked. Mom panicked. We can fix this on paper. Don't do something we can't survive. I typed and erased a dozen replies. I settled on, stop writing to the wrong audience. He wrote back the only true thing he'd said in months. I don't know who the right one is anymore. Jules's apology arrived in triplicate text, email, a voicemail that sounded like someone drowning under silk. I thought I was protecting you. Vic said she'd cut your name from donors to spare you the press. She asked me to help with access. I told myself I was building you a door. The retainer she'd accepted from Victoria was small enough to feel deniable and large enough to buy exactly the wrong kind of loyalty. She sent a screenshot of the transfer as if evidence could wash itself. I'll resign from everything. I'll tell anyone what I did. I stared long enough to decide not to answer until I could do it without adding a cruelty I'd regret. Atlas and Ivy surged the way businesses surge when crisis clarifies a brand. 3 clients who used to address me like a concierge sent new scopes with words like lead and strategy instead of can you just. Our finance line exhaled back to green. My team showed up with bagels and the specific humor of people who have watched you stop apologizing. You're trending in my aunt's bridge club, my dev said. She thinks you're a folk hero. Tell her folk heroes still bill net 15, I said, and the room laughed like a lung. That night I walked Beacon Hill and tried to find the part of me that would miss what I had only pretended to belong to. The townhouses wore their old money faces. The cobblestones did their ankle-breaking best. I thought about the word family and decided it works better as a verb than a noun. Just after 10, my phone buzzed with the same unknown number that had saved me in Paris. You don't know me. We will never be friends. But I won't raise a child on a lie. A link. A minute later, an email slid into the vault. FW. Saturday remarks comms run through. An attached video opened on Edward's study, wood-paneled and self-important. Edward's voice off camera. We stick to mutual, we stick to respect, we keep her out of Q&A, and if she pushes, we say she asked for privacy. Aiden's voice tinny. Harrogate set. Rathbone's ready if she goes litigious. Jules confirmed we have a backdoor if we need to clean up Atlas and Ivy. The camera jostled. Whoever recorded it was pretending to adjust flowers. Then Victoria on screen, smooth as glass. Make her think it was her choice. Audio timestamp. The morning of the flight to Paris. I watched it twice, then a third time, noting the details that juries love and liars forget, the calendar in the corner, the reflection of Edward's cufflinks in the framed diploma, the way Victoria looked into a lens she hadn't noticed and didn't blink. A second message followed from the same number, this time with a name. It's Celeste. Don't call back. Don't thank me, just use it. I typed thank and deleted it. I forwarded the file to my lawyer with a subject line that felt like a hand closing around a lever. On record planning, com/finance/access. Then I set my phone face down and listened to the house breathe. Across town, somewhere beneath a roof someone else had paid for, a woman I didn't owe anything to had chosen to count me in where it mattered. Grant chose a hotel bar that tried to look like an apology. Low lamps, leather that remembered other mistakes, a pianist who knew how to make shame sound expensive. He stood when I walked in, then thought better of it and sat. You look tired, I said. We're past tired, he answered. Name your number. Not selling, I said, sliding into the booth. He blinked like I'd spoken math wrong. Everyone has a number. I have terms, I said, and put a single sheet on the table. My lawyer condensed mercy into bullet points, clean severance from liability, no assumption of W&H debts, indemnity if their mess splashes, mutual non-disparagement that doesn't gag truth or regulators, disclosure that I was excluded from finances by design. I sign this. You sign the divorce. You keep your houses and your ghosts. I keep what's mine. Grant skimmed, mouth tightening at the parts that protected me from their favorite hobby, reputation maintenance. The board will never. This doesn't need a board, I said. It needs a pen. He tried the old voice, the one that sounded like a dock at sunset. Maya, I made mistakes. I should have. You should have counted me, I said. You shouldn't have written my exit like a toast. He folded his hands. Mom thinks you're grandstanding. Your mother thinks gravity answers to her. I'm just putting the floor back. He reached into his jacket and set down a folder as if it were a flower he hoped I'd love. Mutual NDA. The penalty staircase climbed like a bad idea. You avoid the mess. You go back to building your app. No press. No hearings. I don't do gag orders, I said. Can't buy the ending. You're doing this for vengeance. I'm doing it so I can breathe without your mother's hand on my throat, I said. And because there's a baby coming. Lies make babies cough. His face shifted, ashamed, defensive, human. Celeste told you. She told the truth, I said. You should practice. He ran a thumb over the NDA's spine. If I sign yours, you don't go to the press. I go to my life, I said. If regulators call, I answer. Reporters call, I say no comment. If your family tries to drag me down, the vault opens. He poured himself water like it was punishment. You always were good at leverage. I learned from the best, I said, and then I learned to use it on the right axis. He read the page again, jaw working. Dad will say we're rewarding you for bad behavior. Tell him I'm not a dog, I said. Tell him I built the room you ate in. He signed once, then again. Initials where they belonged. The pen left a decisive line like a door closing. You'll be protected, he said, and for a second I remembered the boy on the ferry who had meant it. I slid the paper into my bag. He slid his NDA into nowhere. Jules, I asked, his mouth tilted. Mom says she's dramatic. I think she's drowning. She quit. Sent Mom a paragraph that read like a confession. I don't know what to do with people who apologize. We don't really do that. Start, I said. His phone buzzed. He looked at it and turned it face down. Aiden's nervous, he said. He's talking about counsel about proffers. He thinks if he names everyone, he gets to keep his bones. Then you should order soup, I said. It's a long winter. He winced. You're enjoying this. Wrong verb, I said. I'm enduring it better than you planned. He stood. I have to go, he said. There's a meeting. We're plugging holes with capital we don't have. Wear boots, I said. It's deep. He hesitated, then leaned over the table like a man about to admit a small crime. Loved me, he said. I did, I said. It doesn't make me wrong. He left. The pianist modulated to something optimistic like a lie you tell a child. I stayed until the drink I didn't order sweated into a circle on the table, then paid the circle's bill and went home. In the morning my lawyer called with a voice that had caffeine and satisfaction in it. Document received. Filed. You're shielded from W&H liabilities as negotiated, they blinked. Blinking beats plotting, I said. Also, she added, we've been contacted informally by counsel for Mr. Park. He's seeking a proffer session. Says he can corroborate the BVI structure, custodial pass-through, donor collateralization. He used the phrase, I will not be the fall guy. Good, I said. Fall where you meant to stand. By noon, the Globe ran a longer piece. Careful words about internal review, board transitions, questions from limited partners. 2 donor families pulled their names from a gala page that used to shine like a chandelier. A push alert popped up from a financial blog that likes other people's blood. Exclusive. Interim CFO flip at W&H. Slush probe widens. My phone hummed with new business, with old friends who finally believed me, with strangers who wanted to be clients because someone had told the room no. Jules texted, I'm sorry. It isn't enough, but it's true. I typed, it's both. She sent a crying emoji, then I'm here if you need me to testify. I stared at that word until it steadied testify from the Latin for witness for make a thing seen. Late afternoon, I dropped by my mother's shop. She was stripping thorns like the day we built a life out of tips. You look taller, she said. I set down the weight, I said. You kept the receipts, in a vault. Good girl, she said, and kissed my hair like a stamp. At home, I opened the windows. The townhouse took a long breath. Papers were stacked in the order my mind liked. Paris, guarantees, reversals, confession tape, signatures. I made tea. I told myself the worst noises were over. Then the doorbell rang, a clean, official sound that didn't belong to delivery guys or neighbors who borrow sugar. Through the fisheye, a woman and a man in dark suits rain on their shoulders like epaulets, the tired competence of people who carry envelopes that rearrange lives. I buzzed them in. The woman flashed ID so quickly the seal still glinted when she lowered it. MS, Tran Whitaker. Just Tran, I said. She nodded, opened the leather folio, and slid a packet toward me with 2 fingers. The word subpoena sat on top like a judge. This is a formal request for records pertaining to Atlas and Ivy guarantees and any communications with Whitaker and Hale, including but not limited to my vault, I said. Your vault, she finished, almost kindly. We can schedule a time for collection. My phone vibrated on the counter, unknown number, then another. I didn't reach for it. The man set down a second envelope. There's also a preservation notice for any data related to Rathbone Plains and Harrogate Holdings. The names darkened the room. I've kept everything, I said. We figured, the woman answered. Most people say they have, you actually do. Footsteps echoed in the hall. Another knock, harder mail. The suits glanced at each other. You expecting counsel? The man asked. No, I said. I opened the door to find Grant on the threshold, rain in his hair, eyes shocked wide like the moment before a vase hits tile. He clocked the badges, the envelopes, the air. His mouth opened on my name and closed on someone else's. They're at my parents' house, he said, voice scraped raw. And the office, and Aiden's. And he looked at the packet in my hand like a lifeline and a weapon. What did you do? Breathed, I said. From the sidewalk, sirens threaded the wet. A sound that belongs to no one and everyone. The woman cleared her throat. We'll be in touch, she said. Grant took a step in, stopped himself on the threshold like a dog that knows better than to cross a line it doesn't understand. Maya, he whispered, can you? Behind him, a second car idled, dark glass engine patient. The rear door opened, and for the first time in the history of her control, Victoria stood on my stoop without a script. A year later, the lake is a sheet of hammered silver, and the mountains wear green like a well-cut suit. The villa's terrace smells of lemon leaves and hot stone. Down in the kitchen, someone is shouting joyfully in Italian about a crate of figs. I stand with a headset on because old habits are harder to retire than surnames, but the voice in my ear is my own team, and the toggles I touch belong to Atlas and Ivy. We keep the lights, not the lies. The couple tonight are people whose names buy attention, and whose eyes, mercifully, still soften when they look at each other. Their planner, me, said no to 8 helicopters, and yes to a string quartet that knows when to disappear. The run of show is quiet, precise, breathable. I can tell I did it right because the staff is relaxed and the bride's shoulders forgot to touch her ears. When donors ask how the Rome story ended, I tell them the parts I own. Subpoenas arrived like weather. Aiden decided he preferred truth to prison coffee. My signatures kept me dry. The divorce decree is a thin folder. It sits behind thicker files labeled Product Roadmap and Team. Whitaker and Hale learned to conjugate the word consequences. Victoria learned the word emeritus. I didn't celebrate. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and slept 13 hours, then opened the shop with my mother and made centerpieces for a community clinic, because surviving is not the same as mattering. Jules showed up at my door 2 months later with a legal pad, clean hair, and the expression of a person who finally believes in gravity. She told the truth on paper and in rooms that smell like photocopiers and consequences. We are not what we were, we are not nothing. Sometimes she leaves peonies on my stoop with a post-it that says count me in. Sometimes I text I see you and mean it. Celeste sent a postcard from a park bench in early spring, a stroller wheel, a sock with clouds, a baby fist like punctuation. On the back, 3 words, she sleeps sometimes. No return address, no request. I pinned it to the corkboard above my desk like a small, bright mercy. At Camo, the sun slides. The quartet tunes by instinct. A breeze tests the candles and decides to be kind. My mother calls from Boston to ask if the figs are sweet and to remind me to drink water. I tell her the figs are arrogant and perfect. I take a sip. The email lands the way old weather does, a polite ping, a familiar crest. Whitaker Foundation, request for proposal, spring gala. The message is brief, unscented. We admire your recent work. We would welcome a proposal. The sender is not Victoria. The sender is a staffer who has learned to put her own name on things. Still, the shadow in the font recognizes me. I forward it to my team with the subject line decline, type 1 sentence and hit send. We're fully booked. My hand doesn't shake. On the terrace, the bride takes her father's arm. The quartet finds the opening note. 100 chairs shine like prayers. I watch the procession begin and remember the garden in Paris, the place where my seat was a decision about my life. I raise my glass, not to revenge, which is noisy and small, but to the door I found when the room tried to close. Later, when the last plate is stacked and the lake has turned to ink, I walk the gravel path alone. The air smells like basil and cold marble. A generator hums somewhere, loyal and unseen. I stop at the 13th chair we added for grandmother who arrived late and laugh quietly because the universe has a sense of humor. "Seems I'm not family," I had said. It turned out to be an invitation. I toast the missing chair that counted me wrong and count, out loud, what stayed. My mother's voice, my team's hands, a company with its name on its own guarantees, a friend who told the truth, a stranger's postcard, a life that doesn't require a corridor. Then I turn toward the door, mine, and go in.